Welcome to 5 Dubs by MDDC Press. I'm your host, Rebecca Snyder, the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, and DC Press Association, which represents news media in our region. 5 Dubs focuses on the who, what, when, where, and why of local news media. We'll talk with the journalists about the stories behind the news. You can find more information about our guests in the show notes or on our website, www.5-dubs.com. Welcome to the program. Today we are here with Audrey Cooper, who is now the executive editor-in-chief or executive editor of the Banner.
Yeah.
What do you
All
like?
of the above.
All of it.
All
She is
of it.
everything. So welcome. I'm really glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you for asking me. It's nice to meet you.
Likewise. And so tell us a little bit. You just came to the Banner a month ago?
Oh, gosh. No, well, it's been about 4.5 months. I just moved to Baltimore about a month ago, but I started a little bit before that. So it's about
Okay.
4.5 months.
So,
So I know everything now.
sure, everything's great. So then tell us, you started right at the near the end of the year, and you came from New York. So tell us what brought you to the Banner, and then I totally want to hear what you're finding about Baltimore, because I live here too. So I'm interested to see what you have to say about the city.
Yeah. Well, so yes, we moved here from New York City, and I think probably a lot of people in Maryland know the Banner's founding editor-in-chief,
Mm-hmm.
Kimmy Yoshino, and I have had a little bit of parallel careers. We are both started our careers in California. We even worked for the same tiny little newspaper in California's Central Valley, not at the same time, but close. So I feel like I've been missing Kimmy. We've been missing each other. And then she was at the LA Times and I was at the San Francisco Chronicle. So we've known each other for a little while. And when she announced that she was leaving to go to the Washington Post, it was after the Banner had such a wonderful year, winning a
Yes.
Pulitzer. And then she was going on to be managing editor of the Washington Post. And I sent her a text that said, wow, what an amazing year. Congratulations. And she just texted me back one line that said, "You should move to Baltimore." And I thought, "Oh, Kimmy, I'm not moving to Baltimore." And then somebody else texted me, one of our board members, and said basically the same thing. You should think about moving to Baltimore. And if one person says it to you, it's one thing. But if like a lot of people, so I started
Starts to feel like destiny. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt a little bit like, well, maybe I shouldn't dismiss this out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started reading what the Banner had been doing because I didn't really have much of a chance to do that being in New York City. And I was so impressed with the storytelling and the journalism that it was producing that I texted them back and said, okay, I'll have a conversation. And that was in May. And
Mm-hmm.
now I live in Baltimore. So
And what a year it is, my goodness.
yeah.
So, and the storytelling that the Banner is doing, and just sort of that being a little bit more sort of platform agnostic in some ways. I wanted to understand from you. You've worked in a lot of different venues because you've been in print, you've been in public radio. Sort of what's that through line for you? How does it all come together, and what are you seeing that's different in the opportunity?
Yeah, it's a really good question because you're right. I think my experience is may look on paper sort of random, but to me it has been very strategic, which is my goal in life really is to save local news. I think my husband really gets very annoyed when I say things like this, but I really think America is in the state that we are today because we've forgotten to have civic conversations. And the reason I think we've forgotten how to do that is because we now spend the majority of our time worrying about national culture war issues
Mm-hmm.
instead of the basic stuff that's happening in our backyard. And if we were to refocus all of our collective attention on these literal bread and butter issues that affect our lives every day, I think we could get a lot more agreement as Americans.
Mhm.
And I feel this like I can take the entire podcast just talking about local news, but so I never felt a draw to become a national, publication. I'm always very focused on local. And to me, you can't separate how to save local journalism from the business model itself.
Mhm.
So, and so I started at, really most of my career I spent at the San Francisco Chronicle, where I went from like what I call the baby editor to the editor in chief. And it I love the Chronicle so much. I love all my colleagues there. And but I did start to really wonder if there was a long-term problem with the inherent for-profit business model, because
Mhm.
for-profit businesses, to stay healthy, have to grow their profits every year. And it was really at about the time when nonprofit news was taking off, and I got a call to go join WNYC, which is NPR's largest local station in New York City.
Mhm.
And WNYC had a lot of the same problems that I had fixed at the San Francisco Chronicle in terms of the quality of journalism, the digital aptitude, and frankly, the newsroom culture. Like both of those, the newsroom seemed very similar to me in that way.
Mhm.
And I thought, oh, I know how to fix all of those things, but I don't know anything about radio, so that would be fun to learn.
Sure.
And I didn't know anything about nonprofit journalism either. So, like, the pendulum for me swung in the totally opposite direction, and I've been on this hunt, really, for an organization that does all the things that I think a local journalism organization needs to do. And the thing that really sold me on the Banner is I think it has the the our CEO has said, I will misquote him, but the mindset of a for-profit company with the nonprofit heart, which I really really resonates with me a lot. You do have to be very audience focused in a for-profit company, because otherwise you're not going to make any money, right? You're going to
Right, right.
end up laying people off. But the best thing about the nonprofit world is that all of that money that you make then goes back into the journalism. And what that means ultimately for us is that we get to do it at a scale that really matters. And anyway, now I told you I could go on forever and over. It's so boring to lecture everybody about business models, but to me,
Well,
that's
but when you
what
get
I'm looking
passionate
for.
about it.
I get passionate about it. Sorry about that. Everybody hopefully can fast forward their podcast.
Well, I wanna unpack that a little bit, and I guess we'll just start from the top there because, it struck me when you were talking about the importance of local news. I think the zeitgeist now is just like this anxiety-fueled paralysis because you're getting all this information about things you can't affect at all. And what I love about local news, if we just fangirl on local news for a second, is that stuff, like the more local you are, the more you can affect your circle. And so, like in times of stress and anxiety, I withdraw honestly and be like, okay, what can I control in my world? Or where can I have the biggest impact? And let's be honest, the federal level is not where I'm having any impact at all. But, you know, if you think about home, neighborhood, city, your communities, that's really where you can make a huge difference. And I feel like everyone spins around thinking about the national level. And I agree. We just should turn that on its head and focus on local. But
Yeah.
that is often, when we do readership surveys, when we do all sorts of analysis, and I'm interested in sort of what you think of like the vegetables versus the junk food. Like I think sometimes the culture war is junk food and people should be thinking about their local community, but it's hard to get them to engage. And so like you've been really interested in telling those local stories. So how are you making local news sexy? Or does it even need to be sexy? I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, yeah, some of it needs to be sexy because otherwise it's boring and you don't want to read it. Like it has to
Mhm.
feel I think it has to feel relevant,
Mhm.
right? And it has to feel somewhat urgent for people too. And I think, we do that in a lot of different ways. It's a storytelling technique. It's a like how you construct it, but it's also the stories you pick, right? And one of the things that we've talked a lot here is about here is like the stories that everybody wants to talk about, but they don't know that they wanna talk about. And
Mhm.
those are not flippant stories. Those are important. So you live here too, so you will appreciate, um, I'm shocked by the state of the roads in Baltimore. Like, shocked. It's so bad right now,
Oh,
especially
the ice and the
after the ice
snow, yeah.
storm. It's so bad. There's so many potholes. And people have, it seems to me, become completely inured to just like everybody has a tire guy, you know?
Mhm.
It's like, ah, it's all right. I got a tire guy. I'm like, in the rest of America, people don't just have a tire guy, you know? And once we start to write those stories, everybody has an opinion about how well the city does taking care of the streets. The streets matter. We just did a story on that I really loved. We're in a Annapolis right now is in a little bit of a fight with some national Democrats about whether or not we're going to move forward with redrawing the congressional boundaries. And,
Mhm.
right, it's just like a they want to, they don't want to fight. And I said, let's just poll every one of the 47 senators and see if they would vote for it or not. And I think we have like 100 comments on that story right now, and people are so appreciative that we asked their senators, even if they're never going to take a vote on it, even if this bill never comes out of any committee, they know if their senators would have voted for it or not. And that's
Right.
kind of holding the powerful to account, doing stories that everybody's talking about and making it super relevant to individuals that I get very excited about.
Well, and it is everybody wants to know, like, okay, what is the person that represents me gonna do? I'm interested, you talked a little bit about, storytelling and format. Like, what did you learn from public radio? Because you can turn the channel so easily on radio. And like you can be like you have to tell stories in different ways. Are you trying to bring that vibe a little bit into what you're doing here, or any lessons learned that you want to share?
I mean, the format of telling stories on the radio is so I think I knew intellectually it was different, but, like, being there and being in charge of it, it is a whole different ball of wax, and even the radio reporters think about stories much differently than your traditional text reporters think about it. Because you can report a text story all day without leaving the office, like,
Hmm.
you can do that, you can get people on the phone. You really can't do that in radio. You have to get out there and experience it in a visceral way, and you have to collect the ambient sound in order to make it feel like of a place. And I think, that was really an exciting thing to play with as an editor of how do you make stories that are, um, how do you make them sound really great? And one of the I mean, I learned so much in public radio, including the entirety of the nonprofit business model and how to speak to donors about your work and what gets people excited um, and where you can really mess things up very quickly. Um, but I think one of the things that I really appreciated about WNYC is just it's a whole, public media is a whole different ecosystem from the print world. It is
Hmm.
pretty insular, actually. I mean, it's large, but it's insular because there's not a lot of radio stations in one market to go around to. And it really stretched me as an editor to figure out this community and how to make it as relevant as possible for people. And people love their radio station, their NPR station. Like they
Sure.
really, and I think it's because you hear their voice and you know they're a real person and
Yeah.
the trust value is so much higher than if you just see a byline. So I think a lot about, how do we keep that trust with people if all they see is our names and not our faces and not our voices?
Well, and I think it was Pew that had the study that has some, horrible percentage of Americans, like 20% of Americans know a journalist. So that means 80% do not interact with the journalist. And journalists are not necessarily great about telling their story. And so you're just like, oh, well, journalists over there. And I do like with the NPR news stations, you have kind of that national brand to say, you know what you're getting when you find the NPR news station and wherever you are. And so and I agree totally on the voice thing. Like if you get to know those people, and that seems to have translated a little bit. I mean, you have Krishna, who's such a fabulous short vertical video guy, is like all over Instagram, and I feel like people probably know him, and
Oh my
people
gosh.
have reputations. Is that something that you're trying to amplify, or is that just a like a happy byproduct because Krishna's great?
When I first got here, I was living in a hotel mostly and commuting back to my family on the weekends. And so I told the newsroom, I was like, if anyone wants to go to dinner, I'm like by myself. So like I'll buy dinner. And so I went out to dinner one night with Krishna, and it's like being out with the biggest rock star in Baltimore. I mean,
Oh,
it's
for sure.
it's amazing. And he's actually quite shy. I think that might surprise people, and like he feels very awkward about it. But the guy who brought us our I think he had fish and I had crab, of course. And the guy who brought it to us was so excited to bring Krishna his dinner, I'm telling you. But how wonderful is that? But he's that recognizable. And we have other people that are maybe not Krishna's at rock star level, but we have some other ones out there. And I think it's so great because people know somebody and they trust him, and so
Mhm.
therefore they trust the brand a little bit better.
So then how do you translate that to, the people who are kind of a little bit more behind the scenes? I know you have the partnership with YPR, so you hear their voices a little bit more occasionally here and there, but is that a strategy, and how do you convince shy reporters to be more visible because it
Shy
kind of makes them the
reporters,
story?
Rebecca.
Well,
Some
but
shy reporters soon.
they don't
Well,
like
they
to
are
be
camera shy, yes.
yeah, they don't like to be the story. They want to
No.
report the story, and so, like, it's always, I'm just interested how you transcend that.
I mean, it's a good point. I think it starts with me too. I always have said my job is one third out and about in the community and getting my face out there, one third in the newsroom, and one third with the executive team dealing with the business stuff. And I also think we just experimentation is important to any business, but it's actually one of the five stated goals that I have for the newsroom is like we will try to push the boundaries of storytelling and how we get our own story out there. So we have one investigation that we're working on really hard right now. A, it's going to be it's a shocking, horrible, tremendously tragic story, and the one of the lead reporters on it is so passionate about this story that anytime I go in to edit it, he's just like doing this, and I'm like, we're putting you on camera, whether you like it or not, because like you
Mhm.
can tell how much they care about the people in this community that they're writing about and how much effort they've put into it. And I think that's really hard. To your point, it's really hard to get that when you're just reading a narrative story. But if you know they were out there on the street of Baltimore at 3 in the morning trying to do this work, I think it does hit home a lot more for people because you're right. It always amazes me. People in the newsroom think everybody knows how they do their jobs, and they think that newsrooms are just normal businesses. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, this is not how normal businesses operate, and like you all are questioning things all the time, and like you know I always say like if you want to design the worst and most difficult employee group to manage, they would be people who have no respect for authority and question everything, and that's what
Right.
we pay you to do. um
Exactly.
that's what makes you all so great. So I think it comes from a place of like reporters genuinely don't know that people don't know what they do. Um,
Mhm.
And it is really important that we make that transparent. And we're going to do that through more editors' notes, more notes from me. We get out in the community a lot. Another pillar that we have is the community events that we do, and we're going to ramp those up in not only in our expansion areas, but Baltimore and its environs.
Well, and I wanted to then ask you, earlier you had talked about changing newsroom culture and how, you felt like when you went to public radio, you were like, I changed the culture over here. I feel like I can change the culture here. So what is the newsroom culture that's ideal for you? Like what are you really like what are you trying to build? And then I want to hear about those 5 goals that you
Oh yeah.
referenced.
Well, the Banner is a very different sort of newsroom for me to come into it. So it's my third newsroom that I've led as editor in chief. And and to be honest with you, when Stuart Bainham and I first met, I said, I'm not interested in another turnaround. I think that's what my reputation in the industry is that I've taken on some difficult places and turned them around culturally and digitally and journalistically. And I was not really interested in that sort of a challenge again, because it's hard work and it's
Mm.
really taxing and it's not always the most fun when you're going
Oh,
through
for
it,
sure.
to be
Yeah.
honest with you. And the most amazing thing about the Banner is like it is for me a totally now I feel like I'm on a therapist couch. For me, it's a totally different challenge because um, we have an amazing culture. Like it's so wonderful. People are so nice, and they really are very supportive and so ambitious. Like in other places, sometimes I'm the one that has to bring the ambition, and that's really it's really hard to make people ambitious if they're not naturally ambitious. So we have the best culture. Everybody wants to do great work. I think where we are sort of is like we birthed this thing, the Banner,
Hmm.
and it's only 3.5 years old. It's not that old,
Right.
and it's like it's in awkward middle school age right now, which is like, okay, we got it this far, and it's really great, and it's my job to make it go from middle school to like college, right?
Well,
And
and you're doing it across bureaus too, because you start in Montgomery County, you're going into Prince George's, you're doing DC sports. Like, how are you gonna keep that culture constant over all those spaces?
such a good question. I actually think about that a lot. I think, with our incoming expansion, well, the expansion in Montgomery County was started right before I got here. But we are staffing up in Prince George's. And one of the solutions for me is going to be sending some of our great reporters here who live closer to there that want
Mhm.
to cover Prince George's County and moving them over there. So that there's like culture warriors who can go back and forth. I think that's really important. You know, it's all about communication and getting FaceTime and making sure that we are intentional about saying what our values are.
Mhm.
And I think that has happened in Montgomery County, and it will definitely keep happening in Prince George's County too.
Well, and it strikes me that you had said, the culture is so great, people are ambitious and supportive, and it feels like a collaborative team environment where everyone's pointed in the same direction based on what you're saying. And I feel like sometimes to the point of journalists think everybody knows what they do. Newsrooms don't always think about communicating culture and like this is what we're trying to achieve, and they're so about the work that they're not thinking about how do we get all of our cats herded in the same direction. And so you had talked about those 5 pillars or goals. Like how and it sounds like you're super open about like this is the direction we want to head, this is what we want to do. But what are those 5 and how do you communicate that out? How do you make it happen on the day to day?
So, I started, I had a 30, 60, 90-day plan, and it was to meet with every single person in the newsroom and get to know them. Cause I really believe you only move at the speed of trust.
Mhm.
And, that's really important to me that I know who your kids are and that you're married and that you live like down the street from me. Like those things are important. And the only way you figure that out and the only way they ask me what they want to know from me is if we meet. So I met with 100 people, 120 people, and like I think I got it done in 70 days. It was a lot of meetings.
And then you
Um,
moved. Oh my gosh, like,
well,
that
yeah,
must have
I
been
was
an
living at the
intensely
hotel,
busy
so
time.
I was living at the hotel, so I had nothing else to do. So I had the time. But it was an investment from the very beginning. I thought it was essential. Like I
Mhm,
don't I'm not from here. Who am I to come in and tell you guys what you should be doing? I needed to learn that. And then inevitably in those meetings, every place has its pain points, right? And they would say, we do great at this. We really like this is one thing that I wish I could get better at or that I wish we did better. And so I took all of those things and I came up with basically a strategic plan for the next year in the newsroom. And it involves like what we have to do from a business point of view, what we have to do from a journalistic point of view, and what we have to do just from a workflow point of view. So our goals are to first and foremost will always be to do stories that have impact on the communities that we serve.
mhm.
And we measure impact in very specific ways, but it can be everything from a law being changed or a corrupt person being put in jail to starting the civic conversation about something. So that's always going to be our most important thing is doing journalism that matters to people. The second is increasing the size of our audience just to make sure that we're serving people, to make sure that journalism can have impact, you have to have scale. I really
Right.
believe that like through and through. So we have to increase the size of our audience. The Banner was founded to do journalism differently. So how are we experimenting with that? And how are we celebrating when we try things that don't work? Like I'm really big on celebrating failures because I think journalists tend to be very change adverse because we don't
Mhm.
like to get things wrong. Like we're taught from day one, you don't get things wrong. And anytime you're trying something new, you're going to get it wrong. So
So true.
celebrating failure is really important. The fourth is a community connection. We started with a lot of listening sessions. We did that in Montgomery County and Prince George's County, and even in Baltimore when we launched originally. And keeping up and growing our community events and access to a reporter, access to our journalists is really important. And the last one, this is where it gets boring, is just operational sustainability. When you
Mhm.
start something new, everybody's in the trench. Everybody's working crazy hours together, and when I got here, they were working so much that it really it concerned me. Like, everybody wants it to succeed so much, but that's not going to get this teenager into adulthood, right? We need operational sustainability, so we need workflows and
Mhm.
schedules and staffing levels that are going to be able to sustain this so it becomes an institution in this community and not just a news startup.
Right. Oh, exactly, and I do feel like if you don't have sustainability, you don't have anything, and that goes through the entire industry, and so, um, how are you, like, translating those talking points into the everyday? So, I'm interested, especially to me, a lot of that is, kind of like relevance and, reactivity seems like such a pejorative word, but like a sort of hand in hand with the community. Like that's what to me, that's all those pillars kind of knit together there. So how are you living that within the newsroom?
Well, that's such a good question. I think about it a lot, actually. Like, I don't want them to just be goals that I present at some newsroom meeting, and then we never talk
Exactly.
about
Like
them.
here's our acronym talking point.
Yeah,
That's so
exactly. Like,
dull.
it's well, and also it's not operationally sustainable, right? Like, if you set goals, like let's hit them. So first, you have to make sure that people are not afraid of them, right?
Hmm.
So I said we're not going to succeed at all five of these at the same level. We may only knock 2 of them out of the park, and that's okay.
Hmm.
We still have to know what it is we're trying for and, like, start walking in that direction. So first is, like, ex setting expectations that I do not expect perfection, and that's
Hmm.
not going to happen. And then the next thing is coming up with tactical things and I keep going back to them. So when we talk about story ideas in the news meeting, and I started calling myself Pothole Audrey, and I think they're all like they roll their eyes at me. And I'm like, But this is one of those top of funnel sort of engagement stories that we're talking about to get more people into the conversation. And
Mhm.
like, so we talk about where they fit in with these. And then I've started writing just a note about things that I really appreciate, and I often link them back to the goals. Like, this was really innovative. Remember when we said we wanted to do this? This is what I'm talking about. This is what it looks like. Or when somebody says, we need um the Sunday shift is too long. I say that is an operational sustainability problem. Let's tackle that. So some of it is,
Mhm.
I guess it's kind of like corporate speak, for a lack of better words. But I want everybody to know there are reasons we decide to do what we do, and it should all link to one of those objectives. And at the end of the day, it's to make the banner an essential source for people in Maryland.
Well, and honestly, if you're kind of wandering in the desert and not linking your actions back to one of those 5 pillars, then you are truly just wandering away and you're not going to be able to achieve what you want to do. Like it feels very like you've created the strategic plan and now you're linking it back in rather than putting the document on the shelf and saying, "Oh, 10 years later did we or 5 years later did we do
Were we
that?"
innovative? Yeah. Well, I hope so. I mean, I think, the great thing about this organization is like everybody's game. When I say this is what I think we should do, you guys agree? They're like, yeah, let's try it. So I mean, I there's not there isn't like 100 years of uh tradition and cynicism here at all. It's like, oh, you think this will work? Let's go try it, which is just so much fun to do every day.
Honestly, I think it's an amazing blessing that makes what you're doing kind of like a unicorn situation because there are very few organizations, regardless of industry, that have the gift of, gosh, if you were able to do something at scale and you didn't have to worry about, your past and dragging it along, how would you organize the operation to achieve X goals. And nobody gets that opportunity. It's very rare to get that opportunity. And it's been so interesting to see you all as an organization work through that. And part of that is the nonprofit model. And I kind of wanted to go back to that because you earlier had said that a for-profit newsroom is all about its shareholders to a certain extent, of course, but the nonprofit newsroom is all about its philanthropic donors. So there's a lot of sort of push-pull, in, like, what happens if someone says, "I don't wanna fund you anymore," or "I don't wanna do this," and I know you all are working to become a self-sustaining operation just under your own steam. But talk to me a little bit about sort of like that, that pool of philanthropic dollars.
Oh, I'm gonna get myself in trouble probably, but it's this is the truth. I would say, people who've spent their whole careers in public radio really truly believe like we are better than corporate media because we're more independent.
Mhm,
And I would say to them, I spend more time thinking about and asking for money here than I ever, ever did in for-profit media. And
sure,
it would blow their minds. Like, I don't think they ever really believed me. But it's true. Like, the for-profit newspaper, I never spoke to an advertiser. I mean,
right,
very rarely. And if it was just because they were walking through and I said hi. It was never that line between advertising and editorial was very, very strict. And it is true that donors often want to give to topics that they care a lot about.
mhm,
So the line gets blurrier. It just does. And I think the great thing about the banner is it like blends the best of both worlds. So if we lose a major donor, it's only one of three legs of our, four legs depending on how we have the subscriptions, we have donors, and we also have advertising and events.
mhm,
So if one of those goes away, we're not like, oh my gosh, we have to go chase those people and bring them back and do something that maybe journalistically we don't feel good about.
mhm,
I think it's a much healthier way to do journalism, to be honest with you.
mhm. Well, and I think also building out the other aspects of your business. So many nonprofit newsrooms really are um, almost like passion projects in some way because they're very, very small newsrooms. They live and die by a couple of large grants. And I think you can have, in so much as you can ever have total independence, wherever you are. I think it just is a matter of thinking through and saying, okay, how do we navigate the environment that we're in? Because no one lives in a vacuum for sure. I was just curious how you approached that in your work.
Well, I think it's a lot it's really great here. I mean, we have a wonderful chief philanthropy officer. She's really great. She understands that like there's she sometimes she gets feedback from donors and she passes it along and I'm like, that's that's just
That's
what
how it
we've
goes.
decided to do, but they're very good at explaining that they don't direct editorial coverage at all. I think the benefit of the banner versus like a purely 100% philanthropic driven organization is two things. The first is what you said, which is scale. We are able to raise more money because we have more streams of income. And that means we can have more reporters on the ground serving more people of Maryland, which is so important. I really think, it's hard to shame politicians nowadays because they're not as afraid of media coverage as they used to be. And I really believe that's because of the lack of scale of local journalism. And
Mhm,
so I think impact and scale, you can't separate them at all.
mhm. Well, and I'm interested in understanding, whenever I take a new job, I always think, okay, what do I want to achieve in this role? So how do I know when it's time to go? Or not necessarily like, oh, time to go, you have to get out, but like, how do you have talked a lot about how you're measuring success and what those goals for the newsroom are. Like, when do you feel like you can look back and be like, I've done what I set out to do here at the Banner?
I mean, my goal is to get the banner to financial sustainability, to get us to break even. Um, and we have a plan to do that. And when I joined the San Francisco Chronicle, it was losing $50 million a year or more.
Hmm.
When I left, it was making I can't really say how much, but it was
But
making
it was
mon
making, not
it was
losing.
making money. We had turned it around and done it in a journalistically compelling way, done it through great journalism, really. And the same is true in all my jobs. Like my job is to protect and protect as many journalism jobs as possible. That is why I wake up in the morning, is to get as many journalists on the ground doing their work as possible. And to do that, my job is to make sure that I help the business become financially sustainable.
Which honestly is so, like, when you think about the trajectory of journalism, years ago, you never would have heard an editor say, "I have to think about the financial viability," or it's my job to make sure that that happens. So, like, did you have a sort of how did that change for you over the course of your career, or were you always were you always
Always worried about the money. I've
well, we're
always been
always
worried.
all worried about the money, but
Well, I mean, I I entered journalism when the good times were over, so
Mhm.
I've only ever lived in a drought economy, as it were. So I think, all we have to do is look at, how many colleagues did we just lost their jobs at the Washington Post?
So painful.
It's an American tragedy, but I think there's no option, but we can't lose. So we have to figure it out. And if we want to save America from itself, we have to save local news. Like, this is not, to me, it's like not an option. This is what I have to do. So damn it, we're going to do it.
I feel like that I can't ask another question. That's such a great moment to end on. Failure is not an option. You're gonna help make it happen, and I'm really excited to be here for it. So
Oh,
thank
thank you
you.
so much. Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming to talk. This was amazing, and I'm sure we'll talk again because there's lots of other things going on that'll be fun. So
Yes,
thanks.
absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to 5 Dubs with Rebecca Snyder. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts so that others can find us. What do you want to know about local journalism? Email me at rsnyder, S-N-Y-D-E-R, at mddcpress.com. Interested in supporting our podcast and journalism? Please donate to our 501c3 Press Foundation. Find out more and see the full episode list and show notes at www.5-dubs.com.